happens all the time. That we design a project, and when we start implementing a project, we see that over time the circumstances on the ground have changed, the clients change from time to time, the priorities change. So we have to be very quick on our feet to try and adjust projects and programs, and often kind of what we call in the bank parlance restructure projects. So how we do it depends from project to project. It's often sort of based on the dialogue with the client. Sometimes it's based on data which is coming out of the system, which is telling us that a particular component is not working and needs to be adjusted. So it varies from project to project and situation to situation. And the mode in which it happens also varies, because the type of data that comes in could be very analytical data based on real empirical data, not analytical, I meant empirical data, or it could be based on sort of regular dialogue with the client who is expecting something different and wanting something different, and then based on that discussion you decide and you agree whether that makes sense and then move in that direction. For example, in Bangladesh, we had this project which was aimed at reaching out of school children. And the project was actually being quite successful in getting out of school children into school. But we tried to pilot two different sets of interventions in different parts of the country. In one part of the country, to put it very simply, we gave children stipends and we gave schools school grants. Also, there were this in half of the project locations we did that. In the other half, we only gave children a larger sum of stipends to get them, encourage them and their families to send them to school. And we did quite a lot of analysis. So we were collecting data sort of regularly and rigorously monitoring it and evaluating it. And a couple of years down the line, what we found was that the districts where we were actually just giving the stipends had a much greater impact. That had a much greater impact of getting more kids into school than the districts where we were getting both stipends and the school grants. So what we did was we presented this analysis to the government, and based on that analysis we decided that we would sort of scale up the stipends component into the other districts also, and really scale down the stipends plus grant component because it didn't seem to be having a significant impact. So that's just one example of a project which just came to my mind, where we really monitored very carefully what was happening on the ground, really built in a strong monitoring and evaluation mechanism, and then used that data which was coming out of the system to actually make changes to the project design during the implementation phase. So I think the developing good M&E systems, I think we're still, to be very honest, we're still in the learning phase of it. And how to use that data. I think we're doing much more of it than we were 5-10 years ago, but still it's a work in progress, because often clients don't really see the need for that, because sometimes the policy changes are not really evidence-based. And so given that they haven't really used evidence in the past to make changes in policy, they're not that interested in sort of data collection, monitoring, evaluation. So this is something that we really have to push very hard on and continue to focus on, and then show and then sort of work with policymakers and show how that data can actually be used to effectively adjust policy or effectively inform policy decisions that they're making. And then it becomes a very powerful tool. So that's one of the things that we really want to stress in whatever we are doing, and we're trying to increasingly stress that. So that, I think, is one thing. The second thing which we tend to do more and more of, which I think is quite useful, but it has to, I think, go in conjunction with the first one to make it really effective to go in conjunction with the data collection and monitoring and evaluation is the whole issue of qualitative evaluations, talking to a focus, especially in education, talking to a focus group of stakeholders, be it students, parents, teachers, administrators, and sort of get the nuances which the data sometimes doesn't tell you about why certain things are working in a certain location and not working somewhere else. So I think that's also a very important aspect of trying to understand why implementation succeeds or fails, and that in itself probably may not be fully empirical, as the case may be, but if you sort of combine that with the empirical data and empirical analysis, you tend to see a broader and wider picture of what is happening and why it's happening, because sometimes the data will not necessarily tell you the why, but you overlay it with the qualitative information, you get a much better idea of why things are happening, and then that allows you to make better decisions. About 8-10 years ago, it would be very difficult to restructure a project. I mean, it may not be very difficult, but it was very cumbersome to restructure a project. And now the bank really did try and simplify its procedures, and that has had a big difference. If you see, if I and I haven't actually done the analysis, but if you looked at projects, sort of the whole portfolio of projects 8-10 years ago, the percentage of projects that were restructured would have been much fewer than is the case now. And I think part of it is because the bank actually has made procedures simpler and has encouraged restructuring, because I think increasingly everyone has realized that what you plan now for 5 years down the line is actually going to change completely during the course of the project. So the ability to maneuver and the ability to be more flexible really improves the effectiveness of what we do. So I think that has become better. So the knowledge actually, comes from those conversations and comes from learning from people who have had much greater experience than you have in designing projects and implementing projects, and seeing, sort of identifying up front when things seem to be going off course. And the best way to learn is to talk to people, to actually learning by doing when you're on teams and you're seeing, you have more senior colleagues with you and they tell you, hey, this is the problem, this is how you identify it, this is what you do. And that is really, I think that is the wealth of knowledge that we accumulate, stays unfortunately just within us often. There are few people in the bank who are good at actually pulling it out and putting it out there for everyone to use. And it's not that they don't want to, it's just that no one has the time or the knowledge of how to do it in a way. So I know that this is something that you guys are keen on pulling out, and I think that would be great. Now, how do we pull it out in a way which is structured and which can actually impact what is then sort of the whole project cycle and how we design and implement projects? It's going to be a challenge. I don't know what are some of the very good and innovative ideas for doing that. When I was a manager in the South Asia region, we used to often sort of hold informal brainstorming sessions among the team, and then a group of more experienced colleagues who would share their experience and share what worked and what didn't. But it was also something which was informal, so it wasn't something we actually then put down on paper and something or something of that sort. So we need to do more. Another good way of doing it is our quality enhancement reviews, which we do, which are actually a low pressure way of getting good guidance and good experience from other people who've done similar things or slightly different things in other countries. And that's something we should tap into, because every QER, or almost every QER, has the minutes which come with it. And is there some way of capturing, what some of those minutes come up with, and then sorting out some common issues? Because often implementation issues across countries and all, they would be different, but there's a lot of commonality and similarity. So is there some way of doing that, pulling that information together in a sensible manner and using it? Is something maybe we should be thinking about, because that's at least something we know is written on paper.